So I'm so excited today to be talking with Brigid Schulte. You probably already know who she is, but she is the author of Overwhelm, one of my favorite books, How to Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. Working with moms of little kids, this book has been like a Bible. Just the validation in your pages has been really powerful. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to do it.
Great. So one of the things I love so much about the book is you let yourself be your own subject. So I would love to hear a little bit about your process of seeing yourself in this research and taking them in, and what has shifted for you along the way that has moved you hopefully from overwhelm to a bit more time serenity.
Well, just talking from the perspective as a mother, and as a working mother, and well, let me rephrase: all mothers are working mothers.
Yeah.
Some of us just go outside the house and get paid, and others of us work a lot and don't get paid,
Yeah.
and don't get the recognition for it either. And I think that's certainly something that needs to change. Where do I start? I think when I began working on this book, I was just so busy that I didn't even have time to think about kind of why things were the way they were, why I was so busy, why I felt so guilty all the time, why it felt selfish to like take any time for myself. I remember somebody really early on when my kids were little saying, oh, you should make time to go for a walk or go to a yoga class. And I just thought they sounded crazy. I thought, I have so little time with my kids anyway. I want as much time with them as I can. I felt really guilty. It felt selfish and wrong to spend time with myself and I never took the time to kind of like take a breath and think, what's really important here? And, what do I want? What kind of life or family do I want to have? And I think I just really got caught up in what everybody else was doing, what everybody else was thinking. And frankly, all of my friends, my sister, everybody was in this same kind of feeling of like breathless, we're fried, we're running around, kids are going every which way. And, and it was joyful. I mean, there was, I do not want to come off as sounding like I'm complaining at all. I mean, having children was the best thing. I'm going to cry. It was the best thing I've ever done in my life, even though they're teens and they think I'm a dork. But, I cannot imagine my life without that. So I don't want to say like, oh, this was terrible. I mean, for some people, that's their choice, and I respect that. But for me, I mean, I almost couldn't have children. I put it off for so long because I was so scared. I didn't know how could I combine work and life? And frankly, I didn't see anybody doing it in a way that I wanted to. And I mean, I kind of hate to say, looking back over time, there's a lot that I did. I worked flexibly before it was okay to work flexibly. And I felt horrendously guilty about it, but I did it, so I was there, but I was always distracted. And it kind of takes away, it takes away a level of, if you don't feel okay and supported in what you're doing, it almost eats away at it anyway, because you're always feeling like you're kind of sneaking or getting away with something. And I found I ended up working 2 and 3 times as much just because I felt guilty about it, which is insane. So that was another thing that kind of ate away at my time. So honestly, I've talked about this book, doing this book as almost a gift. It was an accident. It was an accidental book. I didn't ever cover these issues. I hadn't read Betty Friedan. I mean, I didn't write about women's issues, in my work as a journalist. And to be perfectly frank, writing about these issues has for a long time been seen as sort of less than, or secondary. And so if you were ambitious, you wanted to cover the Pentagon or politics, you didn't want to cover these issues. And so I didn't. So I didn't have much of a background in trying to understand them. And honestly, somebody said, what surprised you most in writing this book? And I'm ashamed to say how ignorant I was, and how I just kind of kept rolling along like everybody else. And things have changed a lot. I mean, I'm certainly a work in progress, but, for instance, my son's a senior and he's applying for college. And I think what this experience would be like had I not written the book. And I was, helicopter central. I just like flying, and I would call myself Mama Bear, and I was on the phone with the teachers, and down at the school, and way too helpful with the homework, and you got to get A's. So I was crazy, and that's why I say I'm a recovering workaholic. I'm a recovering helicopter parent. I totally get it. I mean, I have huge empathy for people because it's really difficult when everybody else is doing it. It's difficult to pull out of it. And, and there were times, I love my kids, but I think it gave me the gift to see them for who they are, to look at our own lives and our own family in terms of what is it, I'm the only one that lives my life. I'm the only one that's going to be there, like when I'm ready to go 6 feet under. What is it meant to me rather than what do people think about it? And kind of what standards am I trying to live up to? And I think that was probably the biggest shift. And, so my kid's not going to go to Harvard or Princeton or Yale. And you know what? He's a great kid and he is going to have a great life. And it really, the research shows it doesn't really matter in a huge sense when you're looking at fulfillment. If you look at fulfillment as your measure of success and not income, it really doesn't matter where you go. It matters what you put into it. You're going to get out of your experience what you put into it. And that just took like this huge, it's like somebody, like the pressure just came off my shoulders. And it was like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? How do you see your experience in college? And we've really taken a back seat and let him drive the train. For good or for ill, we'll see. The January 15th's got a bunch of deadlines.
My goodness,
we have had to sit on him for it. But I think if I hadn't written this book, we'd all be a mess.
So that idea of fulfillment as opposed to success, I think it's not just a lesson for the college student, but probably also for us as women, fulfillment as that measure. So you hit on this a little bit, but I feel like so many of us just feel powerless about overwhelm, that it's just the way it is. I speak with so many women who laugh. They say, I just don't have the time to do the work to get the time. Just this catch-22. So what things do you think contribute to that sense of powerlessness, whether it's assumptions, fears, social issues?
You hit on all of them. And I have to say, I completely get that. I resisted writing this book for about a year, because I didn't think things could change. I thought it's crazy. I'm overwhelmed. It's stressful. This is just the way it is. And I didn't think it could change. And it really took the process of seriously reporting this book. I mean, I took all my skills as an investigative reporter, as somebody who digs deeply into things, and also as a storyteller. I took this really seriously. And I think maybe because, from that, maybe my ego, I covered the Pentagon, I'd covered politics, I'd been in that, Washington Post. It's like, I told somebody, it's like, I don't want to write a mommy train wreck book, I'd read them, they're funny, but then at the end, I'm like, I end up throwing them across the room. It's like, I feel that, and there's no answer. And so I deeply wanted to know two things. Why are things the way they are? And it's funny, I started from kind of the premise that it was just women, that it was just mothers, that it was just working mothers. And I very soon found like we may be the canary in the coal mine, but everybody's feeling this to some extent for different reasons, or for a lot of the same reasons, frankly. Why are things the way they are, and how can they be better? And I wanted something more than the 10 ways to do this, 7 ways to do this, rearrange your closet with joy, declutter, and I love that stuff. I buy it. I'm a sucker for it. I totally get that. But if it were easy, we'd be doing it. I wanted to know, why is it hard? What does it take to change? And where are the bright spots? Like, where is it already changing? And how? How did they do it? And that really those two questions were the guiding principles. And so, when you say what have I learned? What's the biggest change? Honestly, aside from learning how ignorant I was and now not feeling so ignorant, I have hope. Whereas before I had none. I totally understand that feeling of powerlessness. And where it comes from, you're absolutely right. A lot of it is from our social norms and what we expect. And we've got workplace cultures that reward people who work all the time. And that's something that started creeping up in the 1980s. Before technology, people think it's a technological thing. It's really not. It's been going on for a while. And interestingly, work hours started to creep up about 10 years after women entered the workforce. So there are some feminist scholars who say, isn't that interesting? Right at the time when women could have working a flexible and reasonable 40-hour work week, or 37.5 hours after 10 years, right at the time when women could have been able to enter management roles. All of a sudden the standards got upped, and all of a sudden the 40-hour week became 50, 60, 70, 80, and now we're sort of like on this trajectory. So that freezes men into the role of like, I've got to meet these standards. So they can't be equal partners at home if they feel like they've got to meet these equal standards. It freezes women into that primary caregiver role. And a lot of that also has to do with policy. Our country, as we know, is the only advanced economy that has no paid parental leave program. People don't understand that. You hear Amazon does this, Gates Foundation does this, and you kind of get this sense of momentum. What people have to understand is only 13% of the civilian workforce has any access to paid parental leave. The people who do get sort of paid leave, they cobble together disability and sick days and vacation time. That's not paid parental leave. That's stealing from other buckets of your time. Most people, we have this unpaid Family Medical Leave Act, but that doesn't even cover 40% of the workforce. So when we talk about, we're this country of family values, unless that means you're the family of the 1950s and somebody's always going to stay home. So I think that's the other thing we don't understand or we don't recognize, because it hasn't been part of the mainstream conversation. There hasn't been this understanding that the way our policies are shaped, they're to support families that don't exist, in the numbers that they did. Right now, the majority of children are being raised by parents in dual income families. The next largest group of kids are being raised by single parents. And then the next group is kids raised in that traditional breadwinner homemaker family. So I think what's really important, why that's not been part of the mainstream is because the people who need that change are too busy to go out and advocate for it, And unfortunately, it's kind of created this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. You can't make change because you don't have time, and then you don't have time to think about it, so you don't really understand that you're swimming in water that you didn't create. And it's the structure. It's the structure that's the problem. It's not your failure. And that's a huge, huge relief for a lot of people to understand.
Yeah, there's such a personalization of it that somehow I should do all of this and not feel depleted. That it's a character flaw that I feel depleted by this.
And that's how I felt. I was afraid. This whole book grew out of a magazine story that I wrote for the Washington Post when this, time use researcher, they called him Grandfather Time. He studied time. He's this great scholar. He's actually this kind of crazy, hilarious guy. He's kind of a nut, and I like him, but I totally disagree with him. And he told me that I had 30 hours of leisure time a week. And I fell out of chair. It's like, I do not. You're crazy. And so he challenged me to keep this time diary. And that's how this whole thing started. But it was interesting, at the time, I was like, I'm going to prove him wrong, and I don't have leisure because leisure's stupid, and it's silly, and I'm busy, and I do productive, important things. And it really took me really understanding what we mean by leisure time, what we mean by quality time, what the Greek philosophers meant, and also understanding neuroscience and kind of how our brains work, and how powerful our perceptions and our mindsets are to understand that time is critical. Everybody needs, and that's where the subtitle of the book comes from. People talk about having a good life as having time for the three great arenas of life: meaningful work, love, close connection. That's the source of human happiness. And also time for leisure, to play, to refresh your soul, to go for a walk. And it doesn't have to be like for hours on end, but to open that space. They talk about leisure as being that place where you can become most fully human. And I think what's so important for women to understand, again, the social structure has never supported that for women. When you look at the history of leisure, it's always been about high status men. They get to have that time. Women have never had an expectation or a culture of leisure. There are fascinating studies that show that women feel like they have to earn that kind of time. They don't deserve it. And so I think that's another message.
I think that's a core assumption or fear is, am I entitled to this. I think one of the most poignant just sentences in your book, and I won't quote it exactly, but that, that women don't experience that flow. And what does this mean? What is lost to these women and our children and the world that we don't get to experience that? And I do think feeling entitled as a human being who's alive to have that is maybe a first step in inner shift.
Yeah, and it's funny. Entitled feels that sort of like that.
That's why I use it. It's a little provocative.
It's like, it feels like braggy, boasty.
Yeah.
But, honestly, the more I got to thinking about it is, why do we not have more women painters hanging in the great museums, or women writers, or why are sort of women so erased from history or play such a minor role? And honestly, the more I thought about it, it's not that women haven't had the talent or the ideas; they haven't had the time.
Yeah.
And so I did a TEDx talk recently, and my theme was time as a feminist issue.
Totally.
And it's time. We're at a really fascinating and interesting and powerful time in our history where the role of women is changing. It's for the first time in millennia. And so on the one hand, I think we all need to kind of take a big breath and kind of forgive ourselves. It's confusing and we don't know how to do it because it's so new, and that's okay. We're figuring it out. But wow, how exciting, because it's time that men and women could be their fully most human selves.
Yeah, that's so
That's
beautiful.
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. So that brings me, let's see, since I know that time is precious for us too, that if a woman is listening and she's like on fire, I want to stake claim to the real estate of my life, which is my time. What small initial doable steps come to mind that you've seen in your life or women around you when you feel like, okay, I feel ready for this, but what the heck do I do? It's so clumsy, as you said.
Right. Okay. So first, when I first started thinking about it, I was saying, burn your to-do list. And then everybody freaked out. It's like, no, I can't. And, honestly, I have my to-do list. Where's mine? It's here somewhere. But, the first thing that you can do is actually the first thing that I did. And that's think about your to-do list in a different way. I used to say I lived under the tyranny of the to-do list, and and I would check things off and I'd feel productive. But at the end of the day, I couldn't really tell you what I did, and I didn't really know if it was a good day.
Yeah.
So I think probably the most important thing that you can do is just build in, whether it's a minute or a breath, build in a little pause, enough time to say, what's really important to me? And put that on your to-do list. Put that first.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's a very simple thing. So I would say pause. Think about your to-do list as a brain dump. As a friend, this is how you're going to get the stuff out of your head onto paper so it lives somewhere, so that it'll give you space to think about different things and notice what's going on around you and enjoy the moment, be in the moment. But then that brain dump is not going to look at you and accusingly expect you to do it all by the end of the day, or you're a bad person. And I say that that's how I am.
Yes.
That's how it
Yes.
is. But that brain dump is there to help you. And then think, like my running partner and I, I've made time to play. I've made time to exercise. It's important. And so my running partner and I have a practice every day after our run. Well, we don't run every day, but every day that we run, we'll turn to each other and say, what's your one thing today?
Yeah.
Not your 70, not your 150. What's your one thing? And then we both kind of take that breath and think about it. And sometimes it's work. Sometimes it's like, I got to clean out my closet. It's driving me crazy. Sometimes it's like, well, it's really important that my son gets his college applications in today. Sometimes it's like, I really have to finish this email. But whatever that one thing is, do it. And then the energy is so different for the rest of the day because it's a win.
Yeah, and that only you get to discern what is important, that word important doesn't belong to anyone but you.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome.
It's like you can't manage time. And time management is not about cramming more stuff more efficiently on your calendar and loading yourself up with more stuff to do. It's about managing your priorities and managing your expectations, and to understand what those are, because we get so busy, we don't take the time to think about it. Build in that little pause to just figure out what your priorities are.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm so, so grateful for you to contribute to this conversation about that our lives are ours and we own them, and we own them most in the most manifested way through how we use our time. So thank you so much. And people can find more about your book at brigidschulte.com. And I recommend following your blog with your articles, because you talk about Viagra and all sorts of fun things that are all super relevant about what we own, including our bodies and our pleasure, our time, what's important to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And just remember, you make time for yourself, it ends up making time better for everybody else. And I think that is important for women to understand.
That it's not just selfish.
Not just selfish. It's not about you. It's better for everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks.